Right, and the first thing you need to know about Fusion is that it's a modeling program that's similar to a vector software, where Blender, another popular 3D modeling program, is more similar to like a raster graphic or pixel based. So everything you're doing inside of Fusion 360 is going to be based off of mathematical curves instead of actual points on a three-dimensional plane like you would typically see inside of something like Blender. Now, the second thing you need to keep in mind is that everything inside of Fusion 360 is parametric. And the little design here we're going to do today is really going to show off the parametric capabilities and allow us to modify our design without having to remodel everything from scratch. So let's go ahead and get started. Here with the basic plane on the ground here. So I'm going to click the Create Sketch button here at the upper left, and then you can pick one of these three planes. You can see if I hover over there, that's going to give me that plane, or that plane. So you can pick whichever one of these you want to work with. I'm just going to pick the sort of bottom plane, if you will, this one right here, and you just go ahead and click, and it's going to select that plane and then move you into 2D mode. So now essentially it's like the camera is looking straight down at that plane. I'm on top looking down at that, and I'm in a 2D perspective. When you're in a 2D perspective, this is known as drawing mode inside of Fusion 360. I'm inside of a sketch, and I'm going to be drawing my sketch in 2 dimensions. Now, for the base of my simple sketch here, I'm going to start out with a circle, and then we're going to extrude that circle out. So I'm going to come up here to the Create menu, and I'm going to come down here to my circle, and you'll see there's several different types of circles here I can create. I'm just going to do the one called the center diameter circle, which is going to let me start at the center. So I'm actually going to hover over here to the very origin point of this XY 2D plane here and just place my point. And then you can see I just clicked, and now I'm just pulling out, and it's going to give me a dimension here. And I can set this dimension to be whatever I want. So just to start off, I'm just going to set this at an arbitrary value of something like 15 millimeters. Now this is probably a little bit smaller than what we're going to need, but I'm doing this on purpose so that you can see how easy it is to modify the design at a later time. So I'm going to hit 15, and the default is millimeters, but you can also do mm, or you can do inches and feet, and it'll automatically do the conversion for you. I have my Fusion 360 set up as the default millimeter workspace, which probably you want to do when you're dealing with parametric modeling. So I'm going to go ahead and hit return, and you can see now that that's set the dimension there, and I have a 15 millimeter diameter circle. Now, one thing I want you to note is that the outside of the circle is black. Now I'm going to draw one more circle off here to the side just to showcase this. I'm going to get the same thing. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to grab a circle this time. I'm going to pull a circle over here and let go, and we'll just kind of click there. And notice that this circle has a blue outline. See right up here? See how that one is blue and that one right there is black? And that's going to become very important. When you have a black outline on a sketch, that means that that sketch is constrained. When you have a blue outline, it means your sketch still works, it's all there, the geometry there, but it's not constrained. It's not based off of something else. And it's a good habit to get into right from the beginning in Fusion 360. If you're just learning, always make your sketches constrained. It will save you a lot of heartache later on. But blue sketches are something you don't want to see unless you already know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, like us learning here together, make sure your sketches are black, okay? So that's just one quick thing. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but just wanted to get that out right away. So I'm going to do Command Z here to undo that sketch. Okay, now I'm going to recreate that one more time. But this time I'm going to open up my sketches over here on the left. And you can see I've already created a single sketch. It's called Sketch 1 here. So what I want to do is, instead of adding another circle in here, I'm going to actually create a second sketch. So I'm going to hit Finish the Sketch. And sure enough, there's a sketch. Now I'm going to create one more sketch. So I'm going to click my Create Sketch button. It's going to be created at the same spot here. So I'll just select this plane. And this sketch I'm going to create right off here to the side. And this will become important as well. So I'm going to create one more sketch, same thing. I'm just going to click out here. Notice it's blue. That's okay for now. What I want you to realize is when I click Finish Sketch, notice over here in my sketches that I have 2 separate sketches. And something I didn't realize in Fusion 360 for the longest time when I was starting out is that these sketches are created in order that you create them in your workflow. I'm used to programs more like Photoshop and Illustrator where you have layers and objects and things like that. And you can rearrange those in any sort of fashion you want. Organize, so to speak, your project however you want. It's not like that in Fusion 360. Everything over here in this sort of browser area, the objects that appear, you can't rearrange their order. The order is the order that you created them. Okay, so that'll be helpful later on. Down here at the bottom, we have our timeline, and it's kind of the same thing here. We started off with this sketch, and then we went to this sketch, and it sort of goes forward in history this way. Now we can go back and forward in history, we'll get there later, but that's something I wanted to mention right out of the gates, is how the objects appear here. Now I'm gonna do Command Z, because I'm just gonna undo that sketch. I don't really need it. I'm gonna hit Command Z a couple times to get back here to our default sketch. Now another good habit, as soon as you create something in Fusion 360, you need to name it. So I'm gonna come over here to this first sketch and double click to rename this, and I'm just gonna call this my cylinder body. Or maybe I'll call it the rocket body. I guess I'm gonna call it the parachute body. Parachute body. Some sort of name that makes sense to you. Now notice that this sketch has a little lockbox on it. That's because it's a constrained sketch, meaning it has that black outline. If you see sketches over here that are blue without a locks, that's an unconstrained sketch. Okay, so now we've got that sketch. I can hold down Shift and I can use the middle mouse button to sort of roll around here and see this thing in the different views. If you ever get yourself turned around or lost, you can always come up here to the little cube at the top right and just click the home button right there, and that will sort of take you back to default perspective. Now notice that I can't see those origin planes, and that's because Fusion turns those off. And if I want to turn them back on, I can just come over here to the origin for this object and just click right there to turn those back on. And now I can see those 3 planes. And now if I hold down Shift and middle mouse button, or the scroll wheel is what middle mouse button is, click and hold the scroll wheel, I can pan around that and kind of see that in all spaces. Click back home to get back set here. Perfect. So we've got our first little sketch, and we have created this sketch in the default component of Fusion 360. And what that means is the parent-most object. So if I collapse all of these little windows and I come up here and look at the parent-most component, my object is created underneath that parent component. And that's fine for now, but as you get more complex parts, you want to create new components for every sort of particular piece of your object. But for now, we're just going to stick here with this default component. And you can tell that that's enabled because it has this little guy right there selected. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and then extrude out. Let's get some dimension here. So what we can do is I can just select this plane here in the viewer, and I'm going to come up to this command here called extrude. So let's go ahead and click the extrude command, and you can see what that does is it pulls up the extrude details over here, and then it also gives you these little shortcut handles. You can just click and drag, or you can just come over here and manipulate things however you need. So I'm just going to come over here and click and drag. I'm going to pull this straight up. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Middle mouse button to click and pan around, so I can pan back down and then pull this up a little bit. And you can see it's giving me my millimeters here. So let's just do a guess here. Let's say I want this to be 30 millimeters. So I'm going to set that to 30 millimeters and then hit return. And perfect, I've got myself a little bit of a cylinder there, and that's looking pretty good. Now I don't want this to be solid. Right now it's just an actual solid. I want this to be hollow, so I need to sort of cut out the middle. There's several ways we can do that, but I'll show you a simple way here. So what I want to do is I'm going to select this top piece right here, and when I cut back down in, I need that to be a smaller diameter, of course, so I have a thickness to the wall. So I'm going to come over here, and in order to do this, we're going to create another sketch. So I'm going to click on this surface, and I'm going to go to the create sketch. Whatever surface you have active, if you click create sketch, it's creating the sketch on that surface. So in other words, this sketch is now up at the top. And let's go ahead and select this. Now you can see that Fusion 360 is projecting in the geometry from the old one here, or it's still visible, and you can use any visible geometry on your objects as reference points for other geometry. So in other words, I don't have to go get my circle tool and draw a new circle and measure out the diameter. I can use the existing circle that's there and just subtract from it. So that's the method we're going to do. So I'm going to select this outside circle right here, and then I'm going to come up here and use this offset command. So I'll click the offset button, and you can see it's going to create an offset circle from that circle, and that's looking pretty good. And now I can set this offset position to, instead of 1 millimeter, I'm going to set it to -1 millimeter, whatever diameter you're really going for. So that's going to be a 1 millimeter wall right there, and I'll go ahead and hit OK. And perfect. So that's looking good. Notice how I have the black circle because I have a constrained sketch. And I'll demonstrate here in a second why we want to do an offset instead of just a new circle. So let's go ahead then and extrude this thing down. So I'm gonna hit finish sketch. I'm sort of done there with my sketch. Now I have a new geometry that I can use. So I'm gonna select this inner geometry right here, and I'm gonna do that same extrude command. So I'm gonna come back and click extrude here from the tools. And this time, instead of pulling up, I'm gonna push down. So I'm going to click this little arrow and I'm going to plunge down in, and you can see Fusion's smart enough to know that if this object's going into another solid body, I probably want to cut it away. And sure enough, it shows up red because it's going to be cutting that object out. If I want that to behave differently, I can come over here to the operation and choose what I want this to do, whether it's join, cut, intersect, and create new bodies and whatnot. So it's pretty smart about that. Sometimes you may need to turn off a particular object if you don't want it to cut or not. So you just come over here to the visibility in your bodies and you can hide and show those. Notice if I turn this body off, there's nothing to cut into anymore, so it automatically sets it to a new body. So it tries to figure out what you want, but you may need to adjust there. So that's looking pretty good. Now I know that the height of my object before was 30 millimeters. So maybe this one needs to come down, 25 millimeters or something like that. So I'll take this guy, I'm gonna bring him down. Actually, let's just go all the way to 29 millimeters. So that's gonna go all the way down, but it's gonna be 1 millimeter short. So that's looking pretty good. Now that's not a bad idea, but let's go ahead and go with it for right now because we want to leverage constraints a little bit better. So I'm gonna hit OK just so we can see this. And notice now that my object goes down 29 millimeters. I've got myself a little cup, so to speak, a little glass here, and it's empty, and I've got my first object. Awesome. So now we're gonna learn a little bit more about constraints. Why do we want to set up constraints? Why do we want to use existing geometry? And why it's typically not the best idea to just punch in hard values like that. And the reason is let's say at a later date, I prototype this, I print it, and I realize, shoot, it's just a little too short. Instead of 30 millimeters, it needs to be 38 millimeters, okay? So the great thing about Fusion 360 is that it's parametric. I can make those changes easily. So if I know where I set that value up, I can go and edit that. And so for us, we're gonna come back to this first extrude command, which is down here in our timeline, and we can edit that. So if I double click that, it will take me back and allow me to edit that value. And you can see, sure enough, that's where I made the 30 millimeter change. So instead of saying 30 millimeters, I'm gonna update this and say 36 millimeters and hit OK. And sure enough, it now made that change. And then what it does is it then applies all the rest of your commands after that modification. So now if I look at my cylinder and I spin back to the top, that's looking good, but the problem here is I'm going to go into a section view so you can see this. To create a section analysis, this is really helpful when you're learning things. We're going to go into the inspect menu and down to section analysis. And then it says what plane do you want to cut out? And I'm just going to pick this one right here so we can see the side. And you can see now from the side, oh, actually, I'm not cut all the way down right here, right? Because my second extrude that was cutting down was only going 29 millimeters. Since I added, you get the idea, right? Since I added 6 more, now that one needs to go down up to 35 millimeters. And so then you find yourself in this kind of pattern where you're like constantly updating things. Okay, well I fixed that, now I need to go over here and let's double click this. And now I need to update this guy, and instead of 29, this now has to go to 35, and that works okay. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a little bit better way of doing this. So what I'm gonna do is instead of having this extrude command that's cutting down, instead of having a fixed value, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the extent type over here. So instead of a fixed distance, I'm going to set it to object. So in other words, it's going to go to a specific value. And the object it's going to go to is just the bottom. So I'm going to select the bottom here, and you can see now it's cutting all the way through, which is fine, but now I have this offset value. So I can set the offset to 1 millimeter, negative 1 millimeter, or however thick I want that bottom piece to be, right? Perfect. So now the cut is dynamic. And so it's going to automatically cut down to the very bottom and then subtract 1 millimeter. So now the benefit is, I'm going to leave this on section view. If I come back and I update again this first extrude command, so I'll come back here and double click, and instead of saying 36 millimeters, I'm going to set this, I don't know, to 16 just to illustrate this and hit OK. Notice that my cut automatically goes down to the bottom and up a single millimeter. So it's now becoming better, right? It's a little bit better. It's easier for me to manipulate. Now the third thing we're going to do is instead of hard coding in a value right here, right? We just typed in 16 millimeters, which is fine, but it's hard to remember where you added those values. And those are stored as dimensions inside of Fusion 360. We can access them. But what's a better idea is to set up your own custom dimensions. And then all you have to do is update that custom dimension. You don't have to remember where it was created or what values are derived from other values. So let's update this. Instead of a hard-coded value, so to speak, we're going to update this to be a dynamic variable parameter value. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, if you're just in the default Fusion, if you push the letter S on your keyboard, it will bring up the shortcuts menu, or I like to think of it as the search menu. And you can search for various commands, right? There's all sorts of things hidden away in all these menus, and it's kind of hard to remember where they're at sometimes if you don't use this program on a regular basis. And so it's really handy to just be able to push S and then do a little search. So if you hit S, we're going to type in parameters, and you'll notice this little option here called change parameters. And this is something that I use frequently enough that I docked it inside of the shortcuts here. But we're just going to click on the change parameters, and it brings up this little parameters window. And then now we can add in our own model parameters to this particular model. So let's go ahead and just add ourselves a specific user parameter. So we can just come in here and we're just going to click the plus button right here to add a new parameter, a user parameter. And let's just call this the diameter, the parachute body diameter. So I'm going to call it the parachute body diameter. It's kind of a long name. And then I'm going to add the default expression here. So for us, it's going to be, I don't know what we said. I don't know. We'll just make up a new value. So we'll say 16 millimeters, and we'll just go ahead and hit OK. So now I've got a new value set up as 16 millimeters set to this new variable name right here. So I'm gonna hit OK. Now that I've set that parameter, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna go back to that extrude command we did, and instead of adding this 16 millimeters hard-coded, I'm just gonna type the name of that variable. So as soon as I start typing PA, you can see it's gonna pop up my user parameters, and I can just simply select that parameter like that, and that's it. I just am done. I hit return, and it's now set to that 16 millimeters. So that's really cool. So let's go ahead and update this. So let's say I want to change the diameter. I don't need to come back here and update it. I just need to change the parameter value. So again, we can hit S and then just click on this little thing right here, and we can just update this value to whatever we want, right? So let's just make it something really big. Let's 32 and just double it in size, and you'll be able to see here right away. See how it just went up? I called this the diameter. This is the height. I completely messed up the name there. I was thinking we were doing the diameter here, but that's the height value, so I need to rename that parameter. Parameters that are based off of something else, that's based off of something else, and if we change one, the propagation happens and everything automatically updates. So you can set up as many parameters as you want. Maybe you want to do wall thickness, maybe you want to do the circle diameter down here. That's probably the first parameter I would set up. I'd come down here to the very first, and instead of having 15 millimeters here, this is the one I was thinking we were doing, I would update this one to the body diameter so that I can make that bigger or smaller. So let's go ahead and update that as well. So we'll come in here, and I'm going to make this one the parachute body diameter and hit OK. So that's now going to be set to 32 as well, or 48, I guess. Sure, finish sketch, and notice how everything just automatically updates. So I'd probably want to go set a new one for this one. I don't want that one to be body diameter. We need to set this up to something else. So I'm going to go back here and set up a few more user variables. Now you can grab your timeline here, and you can move back and forth on the timeline through time like this as well. We'll get there in a second. So I'm going to hit S, go back to the parameters. I'm going to set up 3 parameters for right now. So we have this parachute body one, that one works. We also want to have our the height value, so we'll just call this the parachute body height, and we'll just set that maybe to 36 to start things off here. And we're going to have another one here that's going to be the offset, the parachute, whoops, I like to do mine in camel casing here, parachute body, I'll call this the offset. This is not a great, I can't think of a better name off the top of my head right now. We'll set this one to 10 millimeters. This will make sense once we add this value here. And we'll hit OK. So I've got those 3 values. So I'm going to come back to this second one, and I'm going to update this. This is not the body diameter. This is now the parachute body height. So that's set to 36. We'll hit OK. And this extrude, of course, is coming down. Now this is the extrude that's the problem, because right now it's coming down in too far. I actually want this one to come down to about right here. And I want another one from the bottom to come up to right there. So I have a little bit of an offset on the bottom that's going to go over the top of my little rocket. So we need to deal with that. So what we're going to do is, let's actually change these values around a little bit. They're a little crazy right now. So I'll set this one, whoops. We're going to go set that guy to, we'll go back to like something like 20 for now, 20, 36, 10, sure. So it looks a little bit more proportion to what I'm thinking. So that looks good. Now what I'm going to do is on my offset here, on this plane that moves down to the bottom, I actually don't want it to move to the bottom. I want it to move a certain distance down and then back up. So in order to do this, we're actually going to use an offset plane. So I'm going to move my cursor back one, or my timeline here. See how I grabbed the little playhead? I moved it back before because I'm going to insert a new step before that extrude takes place. And the step I'm going to introduce is what's called an offset plane. So I'm going to click on this plane right here, and I'm going to add a new construction plane. Construction planes are basically just new planes that you can set to then further work your geometry from there. So I'm going to construct an offset plane. And this offset plane is going to be offset from this plane, which you just selected, and you can just decide how much you want. So I already set that it's going to be the parachute body offset. So that's going to be its value, which I think I set 10 pixels. And so you can see now I have a new plane there. And so now what happens is instead of having this guy go down to the object there, I'm going to go re-edit it. And when it says to object here, the object it's going to go to is this offset plane right here. So it's going to go to that plane because that's my new plane, and then it's going to cut down into that plane just like so. Whoops, I need to set that to object. Click one more time, there we go. Then the offset is going to be set to 1 millimeter there, so it offsets back up a millimeter. Perfect, and I'll hit OK. There we go. Okay, so now that thing is offset correctly. That looks great. Now I want to do the same thing on the bottom, but I want to cut in this way. So here's another tool that we're going to learn. So I'm going to come and I'm going to create a plane right here. So I'm going to hit my construction plane and create a sketch here. And now you may be tempted to do what we did before, right? Create another offset and subtract in a millimeter, but now I'm duplicating work. I've already done that once. I don't need to do it again. Fusion has a solution for us for this. What I can do is I can take that plane from the top, this inner circle right here, and I can project its geometry onto this plane and then use it as reference geometry. That's a much better way to work because then if this ever gets updated, the projection also gets updated automatically. So let's go ahead and do that. So on this plane here, I'm going to say create, I'm going to say project include, and I'm going to say project. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to select this geometry right there, so that circle. Now I'm actually going to turn off my analysis view, that little section view here. Well, I'll leave it on really quick. Well, just kidding, I'm going to turn it off. So we're just back to the circle. So I've got that top circle selected, but I'm working on this plane right here. So I'll just click bottom, so we're in 2D view here again. And let's go ahead and say project include and just click project. And I've already got the geometry selected. If you didn't, you would select it now. Notice the projection link is turned on because it's linking to that, and just go ahead and say okay. And now you'll see I'm going to go back this way a little bit. You can see that it's purple, and a purple in Fusion 360 tells you that you have a projection into your geometry. So let's then just go ahead and go back here to the bottom view. I've got this projection link, and now I can use that as a reference for my next command, which is going to be my extrude. So I'll just select this and hit finish sketch. So it's already selected here. I'll kind of move back out so you can see what's happening. Turn back on my analysis view. And now I'm going to extrude this back up. So same thing like we did before. I'm going to go extrude. I'm going to start to pull this up in this direction. So it's set to cut, but I'm going to use the same thing. I'm going to say to object, and it's going to go right to this plane. Perfect. Now the other one's already offset, so I don't need to really offset this one unless I want to adjust the thickness of this. I can make any offset I want and then go ahead and hit OK. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and turn back off that section analysis. I'll zoom out a little bit here so we can see the entire thing. So let's turn off the section analysis. So it's just back to the default geometry. And now you can see this plunges in there and this plunges up there. And now everything is perfectly set. And what's the beauty here is it's all parametrically driven. So again, I'm really beating this dead horse, but this is important. So now if I just come back to these change parameters, I essentially have 3 parameters right now that I can easily edit to drive my entire design. So if I come over here and change this to, let's actually turn back on the section because we can see this. So let's change that offset value to something like 15 and hit OK. And then boom, that's already offset. All my geometry is magically updated. And if I change any of those parameters, I think you get the idea here. Fusion just remodels everything perfectly. And that is the power and beauty of parametric modeling. So now that we've got that in place, let's go ahead and finish out the model. So that's kind of all of the basics that I really wanted to cover to help the beginners understand what's happening here. Now we're just going to learn some tips and tricks as we continue to model and add things and cut holes and mirror and do some more advanced stuff. It's just kind of technique at this point. But those fundamentals will help you so much as you're getting going. All right, so let's keep modeling away. Let me actually undo that. I'm going to go back to where it was before. We'll just leave it like that. All right, now we're going to start working on the little side area that's going to hold the little tummy timer. Now, of course, I've got a caliper and I've already measured my tummy timer, so I have a rough estimate of the size of the little notch it's going to sit into. So let's go ahead and add that piece. Now, I know that that piece is going to be right on the edge and it has to face perfectly. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can do tangent planes and things like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new plane based off of this plane and just offset it out to the outside edge. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll create one more offset plane here. So I'm going to construct an offset plane. It's going to be offset from this one. And I've got to ask myself, well, how far is it offset? And here's where we can use those parameters again. So I'm going to use that initial diameter. So the parachute, what was that? The parachute body diameter. And then that's right too far. So I'm just going to do divided by 2, which is essentially going to give me the radius. And that will set that offset plane. You can see right exactly on the edge. And maybe I want it on the edge. Maybe I want it to cut in a little bit. I don't know. It's up to you on maybe how you want that. Whoops. I accidentally... There we go. You can do math in here. So I'm going to do that divided by 2. I'm doing little parentheses here. And then I'm also going to add one more little teeny bit minus like, I don't know, 0.5 millimeters. So it just barely cuts in a little bit. And let's go to the front view here and you can see that where that offset plane is. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to hit OK. Now sometimes if the planes are a little small, you can actually grab a corner and you can kind of make them bigger. So you can see those things a little bit easier. And then you can kind of see where that guy is. So let's go back to front view and yeah, you can see how right there, right? It's just a little bit cut back in. Doesn't really matter, whatever you want. I'll leave that good right there. Okay, perfect. So now I've got a plane. Let's go ahead and create a new sketch on this plane. So I'm going to create another sketch and it's going to be right on that new offset plane. And then now it's got to go somewhere. So it doesn't really matter where, but I'm just going to create a 2-point rectangle here. And I know my value. So I'm just going to put it any random spot here. And notice I've got these 2 values. Whoops, I've got these 2 values. So my width is 14.2 is what I measured mine at. And then on my height here, it's 23.9. So those are my 2 values and I'll hit those and I'll hit return. And perfect. So there is my sketch. And you can see right away, right, my cylinder is way too small. So I've got to update those values here in a second. But let's go ahead and then place this little box in here. So right now you can see it's all blue, right? It means it's not constrained. So we need to now constrain this because if I click a single point and move, you can see I can move this all over the place and I don't want it to be able to move. It needs to be based on something else. That's what constrains a sketch. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to constrain it from the bottom. And I've just got to decide, right, how far up do I want this? And so in order to constrain this, I can get my sketch dimension tool over here. I'll click on that. I click on the bottom edge here and then down to the bottom edge here and click. And you can see that's going to pull me out a new parameter. And I'll click over here. Now I could also set up variables for all of this, just like we learned before. From this point on, I'm probably not going to do that just for sake of brevity. So I'm just going to hard code this one in. I'll say I want this to be offset 15 millimeters from the bottom. And you can see it shifts it up 15 millimeters. So that looks pretty good. And now I want to offset the middle as well. So in order to constrain that, I can do this a couple of ways. I could also do a sketch dimension on this side. All right, now in order to get this guy to be centered over here, they do have a midpoint constraint inside of Fusion. And for some reason, I'm not an expert here, so midpoint constraints never seem to work for me. You would think you would be able to click this and say, okay, well, give me the midpoint of this line and constrain it with the midpoint of this line, but it doesn't work. You can see I get an error. So the way I've solved this here is I just am going to create 2 points. So I'm going to click on my create point command. So I'm creating a single point, and I create one right here at the midpoint. And notice when you hover over a single line, if you scroll along, as soon as you see the triangle, that tells you you're at the midpoint. And then you can click and add a point there. So I've added a point at the midpoint here. I've added a point at the midpoint here. And now I can use something like the horizontal vertical command to make this point over here be in line with this point over here. And you can see now it shifts my sketch over because those two have to be in the horizontal same vertical plane. I've got my constraint here, and notice now my sketch turns black. That's what I want. You want your sketch to turn black because now it's fully constrained. In other words, it's being driven by outside parameters that enforce its shape. It can't move anymore unless these parameters move. So perfect. So I've got that guy there. Let's go ahead and hit finish sketch. And now at this point, I clearly need to update my values here. So I'm going to check my notes and actually make my cylinder the correct size. So I'm going to come here back to my parameters, and I'm going to update my, let's pull this out so I can see. This one's the height. So the height actually needs to be 90 millimeters. So we'll hit OK. And the diameter here was 38.4. So 38.4, I can't remember where I measured that number from, but probably the size of my physical rocket. There we go. So that's the size I'm working with there. And that now looks fine. Okay, so now we've got this little sketch here. Let's go ahead and extrude it. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click extrude, and I'm going to pull this guy out a few millimeters. And right here at this point, I'm just kind of guessing. This is just going to be up to you, but I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to say 4 millimeters. That looks pretty good. Now I don't want this one to cut. So I'm actually going to set this one to join, because it's going to join into this body already right here. So I'll hit OK. So that joins out. Now I'm going to start to move a little bit faster at this point. The problem here, you can see, because we cut in, it's not coming all the way to the back. So I'm going to select this little piece right here, and I'm going to extrude it back the other way. So I'm going to hit extrude. I'm going to go back this way, and you're going to see it's going to cut out. I don't want that. I want to set it to join. And it's like, well, how far? And I'm gonna do that same trick before. I'm gonna set it to object. I'm gonna just click on this object, and you can see it's automatically gonna join up with that geometry and give me that nice smooth curve there. Perfect. Now we're gonna do the same thing on this side. So let's just select this one really quick right there. Whoops, clicked on the wrong one. Oh, whoops, I hadn't finished that command. Sorry, I was in the middle of the command. So we'll come over here, click this. I'm gonna do this in 2 steps. So we'll come over here, repeat that, go to join and to object. To object is the one I use most often. I wish that was default. Maybe there's a way to do that. Hit OK, switch over here, and do the same thing to this piece right here. We'll just extrude this one back quickly to the object and set it to join as well, and to that object. Okay, perfect. So you can see now that's wrapping around and hugging that little piece just great. Now we're going to come over here and create an offset plane right here. So let's go this. We'll create a plane right here. Again, I'm not naming my sketches. You should really get in the habit of naming your sketches. I'm just trying to hurry along so this video is not 5 hours. But I'm going to select this outer plane right here and do a little offset. And I'll come in -1 millimeter or something like that. Hit OK. Now I can take that piece. We'll finish the sketch, and I'm going to extrude back out, back down this way. And this is right, I don't know how deep you want this. You can sort of guess here how far you want it to cut in. We don't want to go too far. So maybe I'll go, yeah, that's probably a little too far. Probably easy to see from the bottom how far I want to go. Switch to the bottom view. Probably, yeah, right there. We'll cut in a little bit to the edge. Whoops, scrolled too fast. Cut a little bit in, but not all the way through. Sure, we'll hit OK there. Perfect. So now you can see I've got my little place where that little Tommy timer is going to sit in there. And just for the ease of 3D printing, these walls are a little bit thin here. So I'm going to smooth them out so they'll print better, so we'll get better aerodynamics as this thing's shooting up. So I'm going to click this little guy, and we'll add ourselves a little bit of a fillet or fillet. These are fillets, but it looks like fillet, so I like steak, so we'll call them fillets. But add a fillet here, and we'll pull this guy up, and you can see I can make this as much as I want. I'll maybe just set this to 8 and hit OK there. That looks good. We can do multiples. I'm holding down shift now. I'm going to click on those 2 and do those the same on this side, and I'm just eyeballing these. We'll pull those out a little bit as well. Sure, right there. And then on the bottom side, it's on the bottom, so it probably really doesn't matter, but sure, we'll add one down here as well. You could do these all at the same time and give them all the same value, or you can add multiples in here with the plus. Doesn't really matter. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So there's my little hole right there. Now on my specific Tommy timer, there's a little couple holes in the back. And so I need to add just a couple of holes right inside of here. So I'm just going to add one more sketch right here, and we'll come in and just add a little bit of a, maybe we'll do a different, instead of that, we're going to do a center rectangle right here. So we're going to come to rectangle, whoops, and do a center rectangle. And that allows me to pick this center line, and I'm just guesstimating here. I don't know where the holes are, but I'm just going to do a little bit of a channel. Whoops, actually I probably want this center one. Let's do that one more time. Down a little bit, maybe right here, and I'll pull up just a little channel like that. Yeah, I don't know, I'm guessing on this, but we'll hit that, finish the sketch out. Then I'm going to grab this profile right there, and then it's going to cut all the way through. So when I cut this one out, if I can grab it, whoops, I grabbed the wrong thing. Let's grab the right guy again. Sometimes if you zoom in and out, it helps you get the right thing. We'll cut this guy out. And sure, right around there. I mean, I could say 2 object again, but that's probably okay. So yeah, there we go. I've got a little hole cut out inside of there. You can see. Now we need to add our top piece. So let's go ahead and model that up. So that's going to be kind of a new component. So at this point, you could either keep creating new bodies or you could create a new component. But just to demonstrate how you create new components, I'll go ahead and do the new component method. So let's come up here and I'm going to click on the new component button right here, new component. And I'll call this one the, I don't know, launcher cap or something. Launcher cap, sure. And notice activate is on, so when I hit OK, it's going to automatically create the component over here and it's going to activate it by putting that little triangle in right there. And now notice that my timeline down here at the bottom is completely empty. And that's because I'm working in a new component. I don't see any of the steps I took on the previous thing, and it's all grayed out because I'm working on a new component. So if you don't want to see all the gray here, you can always just hide the bodies and things like that on the component that's not active. But you'll only ever see the solid object on whatever component's active. So if I want to activate the parachute launcher, I would come over here and click this little activate component button. And now I'm back in that component and notice there's all my timeline steps that I took to make all that thing happen. You have to, when you're working with multiple components, you really have to pay attention and make sure the correct component is active before you start making modifications. It's really easy to not do that. So I'll come down into this one, reactivate it. I've got a blank history here, so let's go ahead and start modeling. So this guy's going to come on the top here, so I'm just going to select this guy right here as a simple plane, and let's just create a plane based on that right there. That'll work for us, and we're going to create that outer one, and we actually don't even need to add any geometries because we have all the other geometry. You can reference geometry from your previous sketches. So I'm going to select all 3 of those pieces like that, and then just extrude those. So I'm going to extrude this up. And I don't know, we'll call this maybe, it needs to be a little bit thicker. We'll call it 1.5 mils here. And it's going to be a new body. Hit OK. Perfect. That's looking good. Now this guy's just going to have a little bit of geometry inside of it on the top. So let's go ahead and select that and create a new sketch on top here. And this guy is going to have a hole where it attaches to, the hole's going to be on this side. So I'm just going to add a circle for the hole. They do have a hole tool in Fusion, but I'm just going to do this one with a simple sketch as well. So we'll do a, let's see, center diameter. So I'm just guessing here where I want to place this hole, but that's probably fine there. And we'll make it, sure, 3 mils or something. That's a little small, maybe 4 mils. I don't know, whatever. Okay, so I've got that one there. And then down on this side is where my little rubber band is going to be to hold the cap down against the Tommy timer. So I need to sort of model something over there. To do that, let's go ahead and maybe model up a square. So we'll just get a square over here. We're actually going to do the center point one again. Rectangle, center rectangle. Come over here and just kind of maybe make a little square like this. I don't love the position of that, but that's where we're going to use our dimensions. So sure, something kind of like that. It's probably fine. And then I can move this guy all around. It's not really constrained at this point. So now I need to constrain it. So I'm going to set a horizontal vertical constraint with that and that, so it locks it in. And I'll do a dimension over here from this side over to this edge and move up a dimension. Whoops, it went from the center. That's fine, sure, as long as it's sketched on something. Maybe we'll do, looks like 15 is a nice whole number. So that's sketched there. And then we want to create an inner sketch as well. So I'm going to create an offset. We'll just do an offset again like we've been using. Offset here. This one's going to be a -1. And I'm not sure on the sizes here. I'm just kind of guessing. You probably need to do a little bit more measuring here, but that should work fine. And then all we need to do at this point is make some lines that go up this way. So I'll create a line. We'll click here, and this will make sense here in a second. Click here, go over here. So I'm just creating 2 lines that go off of that. And now I'm going to use a new tool that's called the scissors tool or the trim tool. So if I grab the trim tool, I can cut away all of the extra lines that I don't need. And in my case, that's going to be, because I just really want this to be this outer portion. So I don't really need that guy at this point. That looks pretty fine. I really don't even need that guy. And that's all my other geometries in place. So we're good to go. Okay, perfect. So now I can hit select, and while we're in here, I'm just going to select that inner piece, hit finish sketch. So I've got that little inner thing. This is going to be the cutout where the rubber band goes, and this is just going to be extruded straight down to cut out a hole. So I'll just grab this and pull it down, and sure enough, there we go. We cut out ourselves a nice little lovely hole out of the top, and there, I'm going to hide this body on the main one so we don't have to worry about that, but that's what that's looking like. Whoops, I forgot one thing. Let's double click this to go back into the extrude because I want to also extrude this circle. There we go. So I held down shift and clicked it on that one. So they're both selected and now they're both cut out. Awesome. So this part's going to clip over to that part. This part has the rubber band that gets pushed down in and hooks on this little bar to go up and over and loop down on the bottom side of our tummy timer. So that'll come down in here and then hook into our tummy timer. So that looks pretty good. Now we're going to add some fillets or fillets here, so let's go ahead and add those. Just because this is going to be a pretty sharp edge, it's going to be cutting my rubber band eventually, so I want to kind of round these off best I can. In fact, I probably need to make that a little bit bigger, but you can do that on your own. So this time I'm just going to select all of these sides right here, just kind of work my way around and select those profiles. Whoops, not that one, that one. Select all the top pieces, sure, and we'll just give those a little bit of a fillet, so maybe 0.5 or something like that. That looks decent enough. Turn off that body, and we'll just do the same thing on the bottom. I could have done them all at once as well, but I've gotten the habit of doing them in smaller pieces because then if you accidentally deselect something, you're like, oh crap, you have to start over. Anyway, 0.5 looks pretty good. Whoops, not 5. I did that on the wrong thing. 0.5. There we go. So now you can see those are all nice and rounded over. We'll do the same thing on this one, and this one I'll do them both at the same time this time. And we'll give those guys 0.5s as well. Okay, so that's all nice and rounded. You could, of course, round the outer edges if you wanted to. I'll leave that flat for now. Okay, so that looks good. Let's go ahead and turn on the body here. And that guy's all modeled up. So let's go and activate now our main object. We are almost done. The last thing we have to model is, well, actually we have to model, we're not almost done. We have to model 3 or 4 more things. So let's turn off this launcher cap. We have to model the plunger on the inside that actually holds the spring that shoots out the parachute. So that one won't be too difficult, but we do need to model that guy. So let's go ahead and do that. So now I'm going to click on this guy right here, and I'm going to create a new sketch from that point. I'll create this bottom plane right here, and let's do one more offset plane. And this one's going to be, I don't know, somewhere up above that line is what I'm thinking. So maybe it would have been better to do an offset plane based on that. But we'll just hit OK there. And then we're going to create a new sketch on that plane. Perfect. And whoops, we're going to select this inner ring right there for our starting position. And let's create an offset. We need to project this into our sketch. So we're going to say create, project, include like we did before. And that looks okay. So now we have a projection. We can use that projection and create an offset. And we're going to offset, and this is kind of up to you. I don't know. How far away from the edge do you want your plunger to be? You want it to slide easy, but you don't want it to get caught. So I'm just going to go with 2 millimeters for now and hit OK. That looks fine there. And then it's basically the exact same process we did on the main body. We're just going to extrude that up and cut away. So again, I'm not going to use parameters just for sake of time, but I'll just go ahead and select that and then just pull up a new body here. Now, one thing I failed to do because I started going so quickly was I didn't create a new component like I was going to. I'm just back in the main default one. I'm not going to go backwards at this time, but you should create new components. And then, how big do I want that plunger to be? So I'm going to turn back on my section analysis so you can kind of see here what's happening, right? I'm creating this inner piece. Sure, I'll just leave it at 20 millimeters or something like that. Hit OK. I'm going to come back here to the top, and we're going to create another offset here. So we'll create a sketch, and we're going to offset this one in a little bit. And we'll say, I don't know, 1 as well, I guess, or sorry, -1. Hit OK, and then we're going to get this guy and extrude him back down. So same thing, extrude, and we're going to have him come down. Instead of distance, it's going to be to object. It's going to be at the bottom of this object, and then the offset is going to be 1, -1, or however thick you want the bottom plate to be. Hit OK. Perfect. Okay, so that you can kind of see as a little inner plunger right there. And now we need to model in the 2 rings that are going to hold our spring in place so that he can bounce up and down and the spring cannot come out at all. There's a couple of ways we can do this. The way I did it was using the pipe tool right here. So we're gonna go with that same method. So we'll start off, let's actually hide that body so it's not in our road. We'll hide this body. I'm gonna rename this body just so I know this is the plunger. And we'll just hide it for a second. Okay, so we need to create 2 down here and then 2 on the bottom side of the plunger. So for this, I'm actually gonna turn off this section analysis and add 1 more section analysis. So let's come over here and add 1 more section analysis. This one's actually gonna be from the bottom, but I'm gonna flip it and pull it up. Whoops, flip the wrong way, there we go. I just wanna cut it in half this way so I can kind of peer down in here a little bit and see the bottom here. Helps me work a little bit easier. Okay, perfect. And let's turn that back on. Actually, turn it off. All right, so there's the section analysis. Now I can work down in here. And so I'm gonna click right here and create a new sketch. And to do this, I'm just gonna create a center point rectangle. Now you have to know the exact diameter of the ring that you're creating, and I can't remember. I don't have those dimensions off the top or in my notes, so I'm just gonna make this up, but you need to know the spring diameter. So I'll create a center point rectangle for that. Center point circle, and click right here, and right, this is the diameter of that ring. I'm just gonna guess, let's just say 20 millimeters, and hit OK. Perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna use the line tool to make a couple of lines here. My first one will come from the center point out to here. I'm not clicking yet, and then I'm just gonna roll up, and I'm just gonna hit tab and then type in 45 degrees, and that looks good, so hit return to set that. And then the next one is gonna be, we'll just make this one down here. It's just gonna come down here. It'll be offset the same distance right there. And then another one that's gonna come from here over to here and then down this one. So this one will come over, looks like 90 degrees right there. And then the same thing over here, one right there. Okay, something like that. I've got a bunch of geometry in here that's kind of a mess, but now I can use my trim tool and I can just cut away the pieces I don't want. So essentially I don't want this, cut away stuff that you're not gonna be using. Whoops, not that yet. Cut away one too many. Command Z. I need to cut away this piece first, and then I can cut away the inner pieces. Okay, so I just have those 2 little outside arcs now. Perfect. So finish sketch, and now I've got those little 2 pieces right there. And now I can create the pipes on those 2 pieces of geometry. So I can create one there, and I don't know, can we do these both at the same time? We're gonna go ahead and say a new body here. Actually, we're gonna say, whoops, not W, 3. And then you can also come in here and cut this. So instead of circular, whoops, instead of, there we go, hollow it out, and then we can have the thickness on the inside. Maybe we'll set this to 4. Yeah, sure, something. And anyway, you just need to make sure your hole is obviously big enough that the wire is going to go through it. So I'll call that good there. I'll go ahead and hit OK. Instead of join here, I'm actually going to set this to new body because I do need to move this thing up. So I'll set it to new body and hit OK. So that's looking pretty good. And then basically I just need to do the same thing. Create another pipe for the other side, which for some reason my sketch is turned off. Open back up the sketch, which was that guy. So create another one for this one. Same thing, new body. It should have all the dimensions I previously used. Just go ahead and hit OK. Perfect. So there's those guys, and now we can just move them up. So I'm going to select both of these bodies. So that's body 3 and body 4. I'm going to manually move them up. I'm going to turn back on my other analysis, my other section analysis, so I can see this one. And here's the problem, right? Because they're sort of down, the wire number might not fit through, so I've got to move these guys up. So I'm just going to grab my move tool at this point. Bodies, we need to select the bodies. It's going to be this one, and they're going to move up. I'm going to go to my right side so I can kind of see this right here. So perfect. I don't want it to bleed through the bottom, so I'm just going to go up basically exactly like that. Okay. Hit OK, and that looks good. And once you're happy with it, you can go ahead and join them back together because I want body 3 and body 4 to actually be part of body 1. So I'm going to come into body 1 and I'm going to click on combine, and I'm going to say that's the target body, and the tool bodies are going to be body 3 and body 4. Whoops, not the plunger. Hit OK. We don't need a new component. I don't really need to keep tools here, so hit OK. Perfect. So now I'm just back to body 1. You can see now it's back to a single unified object. All right, we're getting close. So that's the bottom, and now I essentially need to do those exact same steps, but instead of doing them on the bottom here, I need to do them on the bottom of the plunger here, so the spring can hook into the bottom and the top. I won't do that on camera, I'll do that right now. You can do that on your own. All right, we're almost there. So you can see I've added those 2 little things down there. I just projected those geometries up and did the same thing. And there's my little things for the rings. The last step we have to do is make our little thing that fits over the Tommy timer that the actual rubber band winds around. So let's turn back off this section analysis so we can see here. So the Tommy timer has a little sort of bar that comes out, and that has to have a little thing that sits on top of it. So let's go ahead and model that out. So I'll just create a new sketch here. I'll create this sketch on this plane. There's too many things turned on here, I can't get to it. On that plane right there. And we're just going to create a circle here. So a center point circle like we've been working with quite a bit. Sure, we'll call it 5 since that's kind of where we're at. And then just like we did before, I'm just going to create an offset here and go down to whatever the diameter here. Actually, in this case, instead of doing an offset, maybe it makes more sense to just create another circle. That's another center point one, because we need to know the diameter of the actual Tommy timer. You're going to have to measure that, and then according to your 3D printer, you want to go a little bit bigger probably. I'll just set mine to 1.75 here maybe. Hit OK. So that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this sketch out. And now I'm going to extrude this all the way out. So we'll extrude this guy out a ways, however, I don't know, 26. So I'm just going to do a new body out of this, hit OK. And then now I need another sketch to come down here at an angle on this one. So for this piece right here, I'm going to create a new sketch right here in the middle. And we'll just create a new sketch right here. And this guy is going to be basically the same thing. So we'll create a circle. It's not going to have a hole cut out of it, so it's just going to be a center point circle. And I'll actually create it over here somewhere where I think it's going to go. Sure, something like that. It's going to have a diameter of 5. Looks good. Finish sketch. And then, whoops. We'll grab onto that piece right there, not that piece. If we can click the right thing. And extrude that out. So we'll extrude this up, and it's going to be a new body. And sure, up a bit, doesn't really matter what, but we need to put an angle on this thing. So I'm going to hit OK on new body, and then I'm going to rotate this. I need to rotate it back in so the rubber band slips off. So I'm going to grab my move tool and just grab this object and then just kind of rotate it in bit like this, whatever makes you happy. That makes me happy. Hit OK. Now I'm just about there, and I need to join these 2 things together. So we'll grab these 2 pieces and join those together. Hit OK. So now they're back to a single body. Now I can cut out the hole that we created on this sketch. So I'll grab this hole. That's the reason why I didn't extrude at first, because I wanted these 2 bodies to get joined together. And now I can grab this and we'll just punch this all the way through. And perfect, there's our little hole. So that's gonna go onto the Tommy timer like I showed in the build video. And I think that's it. Let's go ahead and turn on all of our stuff here. So that's we'll call this the parachute. Well, I'll just call it the body. So we have the body, we have the plunger, and then we have the winder. So those are 3 objects we need, and then we created that 4th one as a new component down here, the launcher cap. Cool. So there's all the pieces that we need to 3D print. I can get this little winder guy, and maybe let's just move him out of the road because he kind of is hanging out there in space. He'll kind of go up there somewhere right there. That looks fine. And then now we need to make our last final 2 holes. So that's going to be here at the top of this guy. So I'm going to come over to this from the left edge, and I'm going to do this with the hole tool. You could also create sketches and planes and extrude and cut. But I'm going to grab the hole tool, and you can see with the hole tool, you can just add a hole in here. It's got all the right variables over here as far as diameter. I'd make it probably the same as that hole. I can't remember what that was, so we'll just guess and say 5. Was it 5? I don't know. Sure, 5 it is. So we'll create a hole right there and double click it. That's a little low, so I need to move that back up, maybe right there. Looks good. And then here we can do a repeat pattern. I normally just create a hole on this side. This is the hole that has the ring that holds it, and then on this side we need another hole that's actually where the parachute ties off to, so it actually floats down with the rocket. So we can do a mirror or a command here that's called a repeat pattern. It's right here. So let's do a pattern, and it's going to be a circular pattern, and then it asks us for what object, but I'm actually going to do feature. So I'm going to switch this to feature, and I'm going to select this whole feature as the feature, and then when it asks for the axis, it's going to be this blue axis here. So that's the axis because the feature is going to rotate around this way. And then it asks for how many times you want that to rotate. And you can see if I set it to 3, it's going to do 1 there, 1 there, 1 there. And then quantity 2. And whoops, not 99 degrees, 90 degrees. There we go. That's what I'm after. So now it's giving me a second hole over there. That was kind of a pain, but now we'll hit OK. And you can see, sure enough, it punches another hole over there. So if you need to do things like on patterns in squares or circles, oftentimes instead of repeating yourself, you can do one of those pattern features and just automatically do it everywhere it needs to be. And then, of course, we already added those over there, so let's just complete the picture. That one worked. On the inside, I don't know, let's see, maybe this outside one is having a problem. 0.5. Well, that one worked. This is that issue I was telling you earlier. Sometimes when I do them all at once, they don't work. I don't know why. I'm not smart enough to figure that stuff out. Just start clicking stuff till it works is my motto. So we'll add this 1.5. So I did them one by one and they all seem to be fine. So there we go. There's those fillets. We have those ones already. Anyway, we're just about there. Maybe we need to add one on the top here. Let's grab that guy, mush him out so that he's nice and squished, something like that. That's a lot better. Don't really need anything on the bottom. Man, I hate to say it, but I think we're there. Plungers on the inside. All of our pieces are there. Look at that. We have now fully modeled this thing from scratch. This is the little invention I came up with my son that we sort of made together for our rocket launcher project. Again, link down in the description if you want to see how those little rockets went. We built some rockets with my family and it was a lot of fun making them. So yeah, our last step is to export these for 3D printing. So all you need to do is really just right click the object. So if I want to export the launcher cap, I just right click and you say save as mesh. This will export it as an STL file. So you click save as mesh and you can come over here and choose what format. Of course I want STL for my 3D printing. It's already got it selected. Refinement I always like to do on high and then just hit OK. You can, if you have a 3D printer like I have the software, if you have Cura or something like that, you can just export it and it'll actually put it right inside the software. Export that one and then go ahead and export this body. Same thing, just click on the body, save as mesh, click on this guy, save as mesh, export out those STL files, print them out, build your rockets. That's it.